In this tutorial, I'm going to go through and I'm going to create texture maps for my Gladius sword. So here I have my Gladius. If I open the UV editor, you can see there's my UV layout for it. Really, you want to maximize that space, right? And the general idea here is we're going to create a map that's actually not square. It's going to be twice as tall as it is wide. So I like these UVs. I'm going to right click and say convert to edit poly on my model. I want to put an edit poly on here. Copy the name and say file, export selected, and then in my same folder as my sword, I'm going to go ahead and export out my model. And if you've done the column before, then your FBX file should already be set. You could start though by say media and entertainment, turn off animation, go into geometry, turn on smoothing groups, and then hit OK. Right, so there we go. So now our Gladius low poly is exported. I'm going to take a look at my HP now. You'll notice my HP is different from my low poly in that I've actually assigned different material groups to it. Right? And so what I did here is in my material editor, I just went ahead and I set up a multi-sub-object material. I assigned this to the model, and each one of these I changed the diffuse color on. Okay? And I just went in, and each piece I went and assigned different materials, and I actually went in and I was going through, I was going through and assigning per polygon different groups. Because really what we want is we want to be able to have on our high poly, we want to have some material variation so that we can actually use this to generate a mask for our material generating in low poly. Right, so here's my model. Now, if you do not have a high poly, all you have is an unwrapped low poly, you can duplicate your low poly, call it a high poly, and assign different multi-sub-objects to it. That is an acceptable way to do this tutorial. So once you've assigned multi-sub-objects to it, and you can pause this and do that, we'll go ahead and make sure use NURBS is turned on. So put an extra edit poly in there and say file, export selected, and we're just going to call it Gladius underscore HP. Save. Okay. All right, so now I have those two models. I'm going to go ahead and pause the recording while I open up Substance Painter. Here I am once again in Substance Painter. I'm not going to get into it, but I will not be downloading the latest version. Again, I don't say do not display again because I will occasionally utilize these options here. Let's say File New, and I'm going to navigate to my Gladius. And I need to select the low poly. If I grab the high poly, all right, okay, in this case, my high poly has an issue where you see over here texture set list, it lists different materials, and each time I go in there, I see these different groupings. And that's because I assigned a different material using a multi-sub object to all these different parts. And so effectively what's going to happen is I'm going to bake out 4 different sets of textures. So previously in the column, you had seen that there were 3 maps for the material. This would mean 3 maps for each one of these materials, and so you would end up with 12 different sets of textures for each part, which is a waste. Really, you want one continuous set. Most likely your high poly will also not be your high poly won't be unwrapped like this one. You'll have other errors telling you. So let's go and say new, select, and we'll grab our low poly. Say discard. And now everything should show up just as one texture. And you can see because I named my material that was on it, it showed up here. So here we go. Here's our sword. And so let's go into texture set settings. Because our sword is more narrow, I'm going to come in here and change the first value to 1024 to to make it half size, right? And I had to turn off the padlock to do that. If I scroll down and go into Bake Mesh Maps, I need to do that again. I'm going to increase the second value to 2048 and set the first one to 1024. And then I'm going to go ahead and hit this high definition. I'm going to select my high poly and say open. And then I need to go to ID, and I'm going to set color source to material color. Mine was set by that, I think because I'd set it before. I don't think it defaults to that. So make sure ID Baker's material. And then under common, everything else should be set, and we can go ahead and bake. So one thing you'll know is you'll know if you got the settings correct for changing the proportions, because you can see it renders out those baked mesh maps accurately here on the side. It shows them as half size. It just doesn't have the juice to be able to figure it out how to do it here. All right, so let's go to layers, and I'm just going to go ahead and bring in a material. Let's go ahead and bring in this iron galvanized. That's awful. This is iron raw. That's good. I'm going to use it on my blade, but I only want it on the blade, so I'm going to right click and say add mask with color selection. And now because I put those materials on there, I baked out an ID mask. Right? You can see down here under properties, I can pick color and I can select any area I want that on. See, now it's on just that one spot. Oh, there's this layer 1. I don't need that. I can delete it. Let's bring in something else. Let's see. Do we have some kind of wood? Here's a wood walnut. And I'm going to add mask with color selection. Pick color, and I'm going to assign that to those wooden parts. And then let's go ahead and put something else on here. Maybe a little brass. And we'll put mask with color selection, pick color. I'm going to pick this little part right there. There we go. And then I just need something for the handle. So let's put something on the handle like, something nice and simple here. Maybe we'll put like this leather soft. Click. Add mask with color selection, and then pick a color. And there you go. So there you go. Now there's my sword with those baked on there. All right, it's pretty cool. Now you could go through and you could change these up. If you don't want to have these on there, you could try applying other ones. There are smart materials that you could go through, and if you want to put some of those on instead, like if I want to put this brass on here, I could right click and say add mask with color selection. I could pick those brassy looking areas, and of course you can layer, right? That works as well. And I think I may have like a ivory in here maybe, or something like that, that I could maybe put, and you could type in to search. Put a jade, let's put jade on here. Add mask with color selection. I'm going to pick that handle. There you go. All right, and so you can, choose wherever you want. You could even use blend modes here if you want to multiply them on top of each other. Right? There's all sorts of options. I'm not going to get too deep into how all this works, just because for a lot of people like designers, it's not worth getting into. And you'll learn more about it in other classes. This is just kind of a nice introduction to it. So that's really it. At this point, we'll just do File, Save, and we'll save this. Gladius. And then we'll export. So do File, Export Textures. You want to specify that same, let's see, Autodesk 3ds Max, Scenes, Ref Gladius, and just, there we go. We'll save it right there. Select folder, and then again I'm using Unreal Engine 4. I'm going to export it out and then just close this. And then if we go to that folder, you'll see there's my textures. If I open them up, you see they're half size. You want to make sure you get those, right? twice as tall as they are wide, and then you'll name them. All right, so this would be BN underscore Gladius, and then what's the name of the map? The name of the map is the final part after the last underscore. That's base color, and so we're just going to shorten that to BC. You will be turning in your textures, and I will be verifying that you're naming these things correctly. All right, there you go. So there's my maps, and so what you're going to do is you're going to turn in your textures as well as a snip, which is an image of your sword inside a substance. And that's baking out for the sword.